Hey guys, this is Phosphorus, and in this video I'm going to cover the Season 2 Affix for Mythic Plus in Shadowlands, Tormented. This is going to be from the perspective of an Arcane Mage and how you should use your personal utility to make the encounters go smoothly for your team and alleviate pressure from your healer. By the end of this video, you'll find that Arcane has so many unique ways of dealing with the Affix that if you find it's giving your group trouble now, once you implement some of these strategies, your runs will become so much smoother going forward. In addition, I'm also going to talk a bit about which anima powers you should be picking, so with all that being said, let's get into the guide. So, how does Tormented work? There's going to be 4 mini-bosses scattered around each dungeon, and the location for each mini-boss is fixed, but which one shows up at each location may vary from week to week. Each mini-boss has a fixed selection of 3 anima powers, that's dependent on your role, that give you extra damage, utility, or survivability. Now, each mini-boss has an aura to it that, if you decide to skip the mini-boss, the last boss of the dungeon will have that aura applied to it during the fight. So, you'll save time if you skip a mini-boss or two, but it'll make the end boss more difficult. Now let's talk about fighting the mini-bosses. The first mini-boss we'll be talking about, and my personal favorite of the 4, is Executioner Varruth. Executioner has 2 main abilities that we'll be worrying about. The first one is Wave of Terror, which fears anyone who is not within 6 yards of another player. When Executioner begins casting this, make sure you stack with another party member, and most groups will just stack in melee. Immediately afterwards, he'll begin to cast Carnage. This targets a random player, and at the end of the cast, he'll charge at the player, do AoE damage to anyone in the targeting circle, and leave a bleed on you. As an Arcane Mage, and even more so if you're Kyrian, you have so many different ways to mitigate this damage. The first and easiest way is just Ice Block the charge. You won't take any damage, and the bleed won't be applied either. The second way is to use Greater Invisibility. If you cast Greater Invisibility after the mini-boss finishes his cast, but before he reaches you with his charge, he won't apply the direct damage or the bleed. So you have 2 whole ways of negating the mechanic entirely. If you don't have Ice Block or Greater Invis, you still have an answer. You can alter time, soak the charge, alter time back to heal yourself, and then pop a Kyrian file to cleanse the bleed. Guaranteed your healers will love you for this, and you'll be invited back to groups easily. As for the aura that Executioner has, he reduces healing received by the entire party by 50%. That's why it's so important that you use defensives or mitigate damage when you can. When you kill this mini-boss, he'll drop 3 anima powers: Dagger of Necrotic Wounding, Volcanic Plumage, and Champion's Brand. I suggest taking Dagger for Tyrannical weeks and Volcanic Plumage for Fortified weeks. The one exception to this rule is that you should take Dagger on any week for the other side, since it reduces healing and absorption received to your target, which makes Hakar significantly easier to deal with. The next mini-boss is Soggodon the Breaker. Soggodon only really has one mechanic, and that's Bindings of Misery. This ability will pull all players in and root them while he casts Massive Smash. If you're caught in Smash when he finishes his cast, you'll take a ton of damage and probably just get one shot. That being said, the cast is super long and you have plenty of time to break the chains before he finishes it. So what tricks does Arcane have up its sleeve to handle this? Well, Soggodon will always use his abilities in the same order every time you fight him. About 8 to 10 seconds in, he will cast Crush, Seismic Wave, and finally Bindings of Misery. If you cast Alter Time when he uses his Crush, you can reactivate Alter Time when you're getting pulled in by Bindings of Misery, and you'll reverse the damage from Seismic Wave, be safe from Massive Smash, and if you time it perfectly, you won't have the chains on you either. If you don't have Alter Time up when he casts Bindings of Misery, you can simply blink at any time and it'll just remove the root from you. When you kill Soggodon, he'll drop Dripping Fang, Tiny Dancing Shoes, and the Stone Ward. None of these powers are really that great. I usually just take the Stone Ward to be a bit more tanky. As you get into higher keys, more groups will opt into skipping Soggodon entirely. His aura increases physical damage done to your party by 50%, which can only be a slight problem in Sanguine Depths since the last boss has a bleed, but for the most part is negligible, and especially on fortified weeks, As long as your tank can handle the extra damage intake, I'd say skipping Soggodon is a good move. Next is Incinerator Arkolath. With Incinerator, there's not much you can do to mitigate incoming damage, as his aura leaves behind a group-wide damage over time effect. You really just want to nuke him down as fast as possible while interrupting his Inferno casts. If his Inferno cast goes off, it's most likely going to be a wipe, so I recommend using an interrupt tracker to help you coordinate interrupts, and I'll put a link to the interrupt tracker that I use in the description if you want to use the same one that I do. Other than his Inferno casts, he's going to cast Scorching Blast. This ability leaves a swirly in an area that you just need to step out of before it detonates. An important thing to note about this ability is that it seems to favor targeting ranged players that aren't in melee, so the general strat would be to have 4 people in melee and 1 person baiting Scorching Blast. If you're in a group where you're the only ranged, it's unfortunately going to be your job to bait them, but depending on your haste, you may be able to get off an Arcane Power burst window in between Scorching Blast casts. I'm running 12% haste and can barely fit it in, so just see what works for you and plan accordingly. After you kill him, he'll drop Raging Battle Axe, Champion's Brand, and Signet of Bolstering. I suggest taking Raging Battle Axe for Tyrannical weeks and Champion's Brand for Fortified weeks. Lastly, we have Oros Coldheart. His main mechanic is Biting Cold, which is a damage over time effect that deals substantial damage to the targeted player and anyone in a radius around them. You can actually ice block this ability once it activates on you, and it'll cancel the effect entirely. Alternatively, you can pop Greater Invisibility for 3 seconds of 60% damage reduction, and alter time to reverse any damage that may be done to you. On that note, I have an alter time weak aura in the description that will announce your alter time health percentage to your party, which may help your healer prioritize others in the group while you have alter time active. Other than that, this miniboss will also cast Frost Lance, which is a frontal cone that you need to watch out for, and Cold Snap, which will spawn swirlies at your feet that you just need to move out of. All of this will happen at the same time that you have an aura that reduces movement speed by 50%. After you kill this miniboss, he'll drop Regenerative Fungus, Vial of Desperation, and Handbook of Uncivil Etiquette. I usually take Regenerative Fungus, although you can take any of these 3 as none of them are really that game-changing in my opinion. This may even be a miniboss that you can skip as well, depending on which dungeon you're running. I've skipped Coldheart and Spires of Ascension and Mist of Tyrna Scythe without much of an issue, but it will mostly depend on your group composition and what you feel comfortable with. Anyways, that's the entire affix with some tips on what you can do to make it easier on your healer. Guaranteed if you incorporate these into your play, your healers will love you forever and your runs will be way smoother going forward. With that said, if you think I missed anything, please let me know down in the comments. Also let me know what kind of content you'd like to see more of in the future, whether that's guides like this one or more gameplay like raid bosses, keys, etc. So, thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like if any of these tips helped you, and I'll see you in the next video.